Hi, I am Joniyed Ahmed. I have chosen the topic of foreign debt crisis as a topic of my presentation. Foreign debt crisis began in Mexico in 1982 when it announced that it could no longer service its public sector's debt obligation. This created shockwaves as Mexico had external debt of 78 billion, 32 billion of which was owed to private commercial banks. So there are several reasons for this foreign debt crisis. Some observers attribute the debt crisis to the unexpected changes in global economies, such as increase in price of international grain and oil. In 1970 to 1973, world food stocks fell to its lowest level in 20 years due to supply cut, inclement weather in the Soviet Union, which also led increase in price. During 1970s, oil price hike in OPEC countries let them accumulate huge sum of petrodollar reserves. They deposited these dollars in commercial banks, and these banks recycled them through loans to LDC countries. LDC countries had hugely borrowed from these banks to launch ambitious projects in their country. After LDC countries had become overly dependent on these loans, the oil prices come down just shortly after 1979, thus created a foreign debt crisis. So another reason of this debt crisis is the irresponsible behavior of lenders. Banks in London, New York and elsewhere with a sharp rate of these petrodollars aggressively increased loans to LDC oil exporting countries. Due to the or because of the competition among the lenders, they charged low interest rate on these loans, which didn't give proper signal to LDC oil exporting countries when to stop borrowing. So thus they become heavily dependent on these loans, and after 1979 the interest rate just shot up, and this severed the crisis of the foreign debt crisis. So another reason for this debt crisis is the irresponsible behavior of the borrowers. Countries or oil exporting LDC countries heavily borrow from these banks to avoid IMF conditionalities, as the private financial banks didn't impose any policy recommendation on these loans. Thus, liberals argue that the foreign debt crisis began due to the irresponsible behavior of these borrowers, such as lower LDC countries, oil exporting countries heavily brought to launch ambitious projects to pay off corrupt officials, to import costly goods from foreign. So this was another reason. So the last reason of my presentation is the South's dependence on the North. Historical materials argue that the reason of the foreign debt crisis emerged from the structural nature of capitalism. Dependency theorists and world system theorists argue that the debt crisis as an extreme example of debt trap of the core countries, as the core countries use these LDCs or the periphery countries to bind them to the core, and these LDC countries provide raw materials, agricultural products to the core, and these LDC countries provide themselves as a market for the Western manufacturers. Historical materials also argue that the international aid, another reason for the debt crisis, as most of these loans come or aid come as loans. It also argues that international aid or domestic official aid also works as a mechanism for the supply of surpluses from the periphery to the core. So it is a matter of fact that these LDC countries need huge sum of international aid just to repay the previous loan they had taken from. Thus private and public external finance perpetuates debt and dependency. Thank you.